Well, let's get started. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So we're getting near the end of Mozart's brief life, and his output is, just extraordinary in these years. And beginning with the Clarinet Quintet, I talked a little bit about Anton Stadler, and I wanted to speak a little bit more about him because he was an interesting character. So he played in the Vienna court as well as his younger brother. They both played clarinet, and this was early on in the clarinet's existence. The clarinet dates back to 1700 when it first came to be, and wasn't used a lot until Haydn and Mozart. So it was believed that they met in 1781, that Mozart had attended a performance of his own E-flat major serenade, and referred to not Stadler by name, but referred to the poor beggars playing the wind instruments, but the first clarinet and the horns were very good, and that was Stadler, and Leutge was playing horn in that performance. But a few years later, he heard Mozart participated in a performance of the Grand Partita, and Stadler played. And I have a quote from Mozart describing Stadler's playing, and he says, "Never should I have thought that a clarinet could be capable of imitating the human voice as it was imitated by you. Indeed, your instrument has so soft and lovely a tone that no one can resist it." And he develops this relationship. Stadler is also a fellow Freemason to Mozart, and he composes these three late masterworks: the Kegelstadt Trio, this clarinet quintet, and then the clarinet concerto, which is one of the very last pieces that he ever composed, the clarinet concerto. And while the Kegelstadt, which you may be familiar, do people know the Kegelstadt Trio?
No.
Great. We're going to hear some of it. The Kegelstadt Trio is scored for clarinet, viola, and piano. And Kegelstadt, I have it written down here. Kegelstadt is German for a place where skittles is played. And skittles was a game that's a precursor to bowling. So basically, it's weird that this piece is named Kegelstadt. The publisher put Kegelstadt on it because it was written very near to his horn duets. Mozart wrote a set of horn duets, and he had said that while he wrote the horn duets, it was during a game of skittles that he wrote those horn duets. And they're not very serious pieces. They're very charming, and I don't think it's really suitable for the concert hall, although I had played them in the concert hall way back when. So the Kegelstadt Trio is the lesser known of the pieces, but the quintet and the concerto are very well known. The Kegelstadt was written dedicated to a pianist, Francesca von Jacquin, but Stadler, it was written for him, and he played the performance of it. But he wrote the quintet and the concerto expressly for Stadler. And in an unusual move, he gave the manuscripts to both works to Stadler, which is unusual. So his character, there's a little question as to his character. Some think he was a little shady. When Mozart died, and we'll get into that a little bit more next week, but there was he had a lot of debt. And Constanza, to pay for the debt, begged Stadler for the manuscripts back so she can sell it to the publisher to pay back some of these debts. And then Stadler said that, well, they were stolen, that the manuscripts were stolen, which was a little tricky. But it turns out that she suspected that he pawned them to pay his own debts. And there's a story of him. He was made mention of the basset horn, which is a lower sister of the clarinet. It plays the third lower than the regular clarinet. And the maker of the basset horn was a man named Theodor Lotz. And Theodor Lotz made Stadler's instruments, and Lotz passed away suddenly quite young. And after he passed away, Stadler then was selling his instruments, saying that, oh, that Stadler had created the instruments and not Lotz. He did not give Lotz the credit so he can make the money off the instruments. Yeah. So beautiful player, a little sketchy, individual. So we started with the quintet, and the quintet was actually written after the 3 symphonies. I should make mention of that. And it kind of comes after he did a brief concert tour of Dresden, Leipzig, and Berlin. That was apparently very successful, but there's not a lot of documentation about that tour. But we know that it's successful because he went out on it to actually pay for some of his debts. He was in debt at that time and struggling with finances, and he went out on this tour, and the struggles seem to have abated when he got back from this tour, and this is the period when this piece was written. It's a very, very sunny piece, the Clarinet Quintet, very bright and sunny. But he does some very, very unconventional things in it. I just want to point out a couple of them. I want to go to the score here. And right in the opening of the first movement, which we did not hear tonight, typically in this period, in the classical period, a phrase is divided usually, and 90% of it in either 4 bars or 8 bars. You picture, let's give Haydn's Surprise Symphony. Bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba. So that's 8 bars. So he starts this piece, the quintet, with the 7-bar phrase. Very strange. And then he has this elision of the clarinet run of two bars. But the main theme of the first movement is 7 bars long. And I mark here that the first theme's in A major, and the theme goes on, blah blah blah, goes on, goes on, goes on, goes on. And if you've been with me on these Zooms, usually what happens when we get to the second theme in sonata form, it transitions to a key that's related to the tonic key, which is in this case A major, and it will go to usually the dominant, which is E major, but it really arrives at E major. So here's the beginning of the second theme, and he basically puts in a rest with all of the instruments. It does not continue right on into E major. It does not transition into E major, but then starts immediately with this pizzicato bump, 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 bump in the cello. So kind of unusual, and there are some scholars that think that that this piece has a sort of a feel of a fantasia, because Mozart is a little bit looser with phrase beginnings and ends and phrase lengths of 4 and 8 bars. So it's very interesting. So I wanted to just take a quick look at the third movement. Oh, I shouldn't. I'll score down here. And he goes in A major here. And then look, and he pops up these phrases in little bits. Look at all this. He chops these up in little segments, and I draw those big lines and everything. But I want to get down to the trio section. So he goes into the trio, and he goes to A minor. It's the relative minor. That's not weird. But what's missing here? What's this top line? Look at all the rests. What instrument is missing and sitting out?
Clarinet.
Clarinet.
Yeah.
He leaves out the clarinet. So it's just a basic string quartet with a very, very passionate and obligato first violin part that goes throughout in the trio. And he does the same thing in the second part of the trio. And then it goes back to the beginning. Menuetto da capo senza replica. That means go back to the beginning of the minuet and without repeats. So they go back to the beginning of the quintet, of the trio, of the minuet, and then he adds another trio. And now the clarinet joins the fun, and back in A major. Back in A major. So the clarinet goes back here, but here's where he goes. He gives the tune in the second part. He gives the tune to the first fiddle throughout, just like before, and then he passes it to the clarinet, passes it back to the first fiddle, then passes it to the cello, then back to the clarinet, then back to the first violin, back to the clarinet. So he chops up the texture and the sound. So in the first trio, he's giving you a straight string quartet sound, and then the second trio, he gives you the solo clarinet line, and then he has it in dialogue with the first violin, predominantly for the first half of it, and then the second half he's dividing it amongst the three parts with the cello as well. It's very, very interesting writing, very, very wonderful. And then, you know, we close the piece with the theme and variations, and too bad John is not here. This is another case of Mozart and theme and variations. And these variations, he does 6 of them, and they're very, very virtuosic for the clarinet. The ones that are in faster tempo. It's very, very, very virtuosic playing, and shows off a quality of Stadler's playing. It's hard to say, we haven't heard it in a while, but Stadler was known for his low register on the basset horn, and there's a lot of leaps and a lot of low register playing in these theme and variations to show off Stadler's playing. It's really, really just a lovely, lovely ebullient piece, and I'm thrilled that we're having it on the series this year with the Brentano Quartet. Anthony McGill from principal clarinetist in the New York Philharmonic in February. So hold that date. But what'd you think of the performance here?
Beautiful.
I love Todd Palmer's playing. He's got such a big round sound, and it's just perfect for Mozart. It's just great.
Yeah. David, I'm sorry.
The joyful, youthful spirit to the playing.
Yeah, the other players, I'll read through the other players. Kathy Cho is violinist, and she's been at the Marlborough Festival. She now teaches at Juilliard. Ruggiero Alafranchini was until recently the principal second violin of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and he's the concertmaster of the Mostly Mozart Orchestra in the summertime. Dan Panner he was a former member of the Mendelssohn Quartet and is a freelancer in New York. And Alexis Pia Gerlach, she just left the Trio Solisti. She was in the Trio Solisti that has played in Troy in recent years. So very, very, very talented group, and yeah, wonderful performance. And this was from February of 2001. So, but I wanted to play some of Kegelstadt for you. I was thinking I was going to play some of the concerto, but the concerto is a very popular piece. If you don't know the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, you really, 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 really should know that piece. It's a true masterpiece. But let's play. I wanted to play some of the last movements, and this piece is scored. It's only in 3 movements, and unusually it's the first movement's an andante tempo, and then the second movement is a minuet, and then the last movement is a typical rondo. So there's no real proper, allegro first movement in this piece. So it's very interesting. So here's a performance. This is the last movement rondo from the 92nd Street Y with the clarinetist Jörg Wiedmann, who's been on the series, Christian Tetzlaff playing viola, and Alexander Lonkwitz playing piano. So here, let's give a listen.
Waiters always look at me and think that I'm going to have a little salad, maybe a soup. and that'll be the whole meal. And when I do my
Those blasted ads.
Yeah.
Sorry. So what'd you think?
Great.
Viola was a little harsh sounding. I think it might have been the miking.
It's a little bit of Tetzlaff too.
Yeah.
No,
aggressive.
I think generally the miking was the sound was a little off actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so.
The pianists had a great deal. They don't always give the pianist, as much as they. This one has a lot of piano in it and tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lovely piece, isn't it? I mean, it's just such a beautiful little piece and unusual. The phrases are unusual and just, and he has that declamatory thing in the viola, in the middle. And then the noodling that is very indicative of Stadler, those triplets in the clarinet, but a marvelous, marvelous piece. It's a shame because, I mean, and this is, again, I've spoken about this with wind playing, it's that, there are these great pieces. If you're a clarinetist and you have talent, you've played this piece by the time you're 14. And it doesn't show up on the concert stage that much, but it's a really, really fantastic piece. It's a really great piece. Yeah.
Can you remind me of the current number?
The K is, it is, sorry, I think it's 458.
458.
Hold on. 498, sorry, 498, 498.
Yeah.
498, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. But yeah, it's a great piece. And he also wrote, just like, if you recall an earlier Mozart show when I spoke about Friedrich Ramm, the oboist, that in addition to the oboe quartet, that Mozart had written some very, very, how shall we say, prominent passages in his opera Idomeneo. Well, Mozart also in La Clemenza di Tito, which is a very late opera, there are two arias with solo clarinet in it. Very, very prominent parts that were also written for Stadler. So.
Is this the only piece that he wrote that was scored this way?
Yes. Yes.
It's not a very common. I know Edith, you probably played it, right? No.
Have you played the other composer that has written for this combination famously?
Brahms.
Schumann. Yeah, not Brahms. Schumann. Yeah. But yeah, just wonderful. And you know, again, even with the clarinet quintet, that's the first time a piece was scored for that combination. And the other composer to take up that combination famously was Edith for the clarinet quintet.
Oh,
Brahms. Brahms. And there are others. It's become more common after Brahms. Max Reger wrote a clarinet quintet, and others as well. Osvaldo Golihov more recently. But yeah, but Mozart really was trailblazing in these combinations.
I don't know.
Clarinet and strings is just a beautiful, and clarinet works so beautifully with the strings. It's wonderful sound.
Yeah, yeah. Which now brings us to the G minor, and the G minor is, you know, it's one of these pieces where, you know, you've heard it a million times, this piece. And even in my own listening, I don't really seek it out that much. But I hear it and I was like, oh, that's why it's a war horse. Like, that's why it's played so often, because it is just like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It's just such a remarkable piece. It's truly a remarkable piece. And I wanted to read a couple passages from Swafford talking about the setup to Mozart writing this piece. And Swafford says, the three symphonies were written as a set, though that does not mean that they were expected to be performed together. A set of pieces was always going to have a variety of keys and moves, usually a minor key one involved. For number 40, Mozart chose fraught G minor. In this symphony, he takes up the key for the last time in a major work and brings it to a piercing ferocity learned from his operas and perhaps spurred by his troubles at that moment. His country at war, his royal patron away on the battlefield from which he would return a broken man, musical life at a low ebb in the war economy, Constanze struggling with almost constant pregnancies, and his own fortunes drifting away. He was primed for a work that was searching and apprehensive. And here's where he sort of contradicts himself slightly, but he ties it in at the end. I just want to read one more passage speaking to that. It says, the romantic 19th century, wanting to see art as rising directly from the soul and the suffering of the artist, would call the G minor symphony a symptom of Mozart's despair at that moment in his life. But Mozart did not subscribe to the romantic cult of genius, and he did not create art for art's sake. He chose the rage and despair of the G minor as an artistic matter and brought to it his seasoned mastery as a symphonist and his acquaintance as a human being with rage and despair, just as an actor can embody a Shakespearean tragedy one night and a courtly comedy the next. But in these months, Mozart's expression of the dark side of life was direct and immediate. So we come to this in his life where he's starting to struggle, Mozart. As we've said in the previous show, the Turks and Vienna were at war. The patronage just dwindled away. There were less concerts, and Mozart was trying to make his way as a freelancer and struggling. So we take, you know, and I wanted to say that Charles Rosen referred to this piece as a work of passion, violence, and grief. And we'll get to the violence and about the last movement. But the first movement, and I spoke about this off the show, he develops these motives over and over. Ba-da-bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. This half step, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And it's relentless with the underpinning of the eighth. So so you've got this murmuring in the strings and the lower strings. And then a phrase that's rising and falling. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum, 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 da-da-da-dim, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. And it goes all throughout. And then when it gets loud, it's these sort of loud exultations of grief. Ba-dum, 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 bum, 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 bum. And then back down, back down. And his harmony is unusual. His use of harmony, I didn't want to get too much into the score because he really travels throughout a lot of keys. And as I said, when we were looking at the clarinet quintet, you know, you have these key relationships where it's tonic dominant. So G minor the dominant would be D, typically. So he gets through the exposition of this, and he starts the development section. So you have the exposition where there's a statement of the first theme, the statement of the second theme, and then those two themes are repeated. And then the development section develops the ideas from those themes. And the development section starts in F sharp minor, compared to G minor, which is weird at that point in music history. It's completely foreign. And he goes and he travels as far as C sharp minor in G minor, which is a very, very, very distant key. And he's just taking it and developing these little motives over and over again and overlapping them in the instruments, and just creates this, what is one of the most extraordinary movements in the classical period and in music history. It's just it's incredible. And then you get to the second movement, and he gives you relief from that, and it's cast in E flat major. And typically the slow movement is what we call a binary form, which we've talked about over and over again. So you have a theme A, a theme B, and then a return to theme A. And that's typically, in the classical period, 9 times out of 10, that's the form of the slow movement. But he actually he puts the second movement in sonata form, just like the first movement, gives it more length and gives it more importance, and has development of his themes in the second movement, which was very unusual at the time, very unusual. And then here we go again in minor to the minuet movement. We have this dance movement that is just, again, this very dark minuet, this bum bum ba da 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 bum be. It's not not very danceable. If it danceable, maybe if you're very, very angry at your partner. But then in the trio, he gives you again this delight in what I love this trio of this minuet, and I think of it as a very folk, plaintive sort of, you're in the meadow, the sheep are out there. Bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum bum. It's just so simple and beautiful. And then back to the storm of the third movement. And then the fourth movement, was it David talking about no, it was Gary about the sort of exaltation of it, I guess, is what you were describing. But it's really, he uses a device it was based in the orchestra in Mannheim, and it's called the Mannheim rocket, where it's literally fired out of a cannon. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-be-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. So it's going right up the arpeggio, just screaming up the arpeggio just to start the piece. And that's called a Mannheim rocket. So what Rosen was saying, and he said, referred to it as violence. And this is what it's talking about, violence. This is, scholars think that this is a declamation of anger and frustration and fury at his circumstances. And interestingly, again, this is the last movement, just like in the clarinet quintet. Typically, it's a rondo form. And here he comes back to a sonata form in the last movement, and develops. And so it's very weird to have an 18th century piece where 3 out of the 4 movements are in sonata form. Very unusual, very unusual. And he brings back that da-dum da-dum ba-dum ba-dum ba-da-ba-ba-ba-be-da ba-dum ba-dum ba-dum. That's from the first movement. Ba-da-bum ba-da-bum ba-da-da-ding ba-da-dum 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 bum. So he brings us full circle back to this. And here's this man. This is the middle. I spoke a little bit about the other 2 symphonies, and this is the middle of those last 3 symphonies that he wrote over the course of 6 weeks. And number 39 is in E flat major, just a terrific piece, and kind of considered the bastard child of these three pieces because the Jupiter and the number 40 are played far more often than number 39. But number 39 is a wonderful piece. And then you have the C major, the Jupiter Symphony, and I was going to play some of that for you tonight, but I decided to go in a different direction. The last movement, especially, where he's using a 5-part fugue. He's using what he learned from Bach and from J.C. Bach, and actually from this concert tour that he went to Leipzig, where he studied some more Bach while he was away there. Using fugal writing, sort of, and it just chases to the end in this just brilliance. The Jupiter Symphony is just stunning. But there's a story that's sort of, well, I'll get into it, that okay, Mozart created these last 3 symphonies and he never heard them. And I wanted to read a little long passage from Swafford speaking to that notion. He says, because the last 3 symphonies were not commissioned and there is no firm record of their being performed in Mozart's lifetime, the Romantic century, with its cult of the visionary genius, would have Mozart writing them for himself and addressing them to God and posterity. Generations of biographers would paint it as a tragedy that he never got to hear the most prophetic symphonies of his life. Those notions would take their place in a hoary corpus of myths about Mozart, but he did not address his music to posterity. He wrote these pieces with an eye to upcoming concerts, perhaps ones von Swieten was organizing, a promoter of his, and he surely heard them. One sign of this is that after the first version of number 40, he added clarinets to the winds, revising the piece for a concert. Performance parts for the symphony would survive with corrections in Mozart's hand. Salieri may have conducted one of the last 3 symphonies at a Tonkünstler charity concert for which the musicians donated their services, so there was a massive orchestra. The record is hazy about hearings because programs did not survive, and there was generally no mention of concerts in the papers unless a piece was reviewed. True, the Austro-Turkish War had led to a decline of performances, public and private, likewise commissions, but there was still a good deal of music around, and the symphonies had opportunities to be heard. So he thinks that Mozart did, in fact, hear these symphonies and change the scoring of number 40 to add clarinets to it because he heard it rehearsed. So it's very, very, very interesting. What did you think about the Camerata Ireland performance? Good? Yeah?
Yeah, I thought it was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. It just jumped.
Anyone else?
I've heard this many times and I've never heard something so crisp. I really liked it a lot.
I did too. I thought the minuet was a little brisk. I thought it was a little brisk, but I liked the real fire of the last movement. I did, and the crisp is it was very tight, and it almost sounded like chamber music, which is what you want to hear in this period, symphonic music of this period. At least I do. Yeah, just a really, really wonderful performance. But I wanted to close the evening because you have the relationship of this symphony, the G minor symphony, with the Jupiter C major symphony. And there is a companion pieces that he wrote after this that share the same resemblance. And it is viola quintets, the 2 viola quintets, the one in G minor, K515, and C major, I'm sorry, I reversed it. C major is K515, and then the G minor, 516. And the G minor, again, he chooses G minor very sparingly, has some similarities to this symphony. And I wanted to play the first movement of the G minor viola quintet, K516. And I dug up this, there's a bunch of them. The G minor is a piece that's played a bit. So there's a lot on YouTube of it, but I found this older older video of the Takács Quartet from 1984 with a Hungarian violist, Denis Korozsmai, which it's just special to hear the Takács with their original configuration in this repertoire. So let's hear the first movement. It's about 8 minutes long of Mozart's G minor viola quintet. Here we go.
heard this whole bunch, but they're different people now.
Yeah.
So this is the original one.
What'd you
Yeah.
think?
And I think, wow.
Beautiful performance. The sound was quite constricted. It was very dated. But the
Yes.
performance was beautiful.
Performance was very romantic, I thought.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. Wonderful playing. Yeah, the sound quality was not ready for prime time, but I thought it was worthwhile to hear them.
Yeah.
You know, because the personnel has changed. The only person left in the group is the cellist Andres. The second fiddle player just retired last year, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So, but you hear the similarities in the tone of the G minor symphony in this piece. Yeah, I mean it's unmistakable. It's really unmistakable. Any questions?
What were the two operas that you mentioned that used the Stadler were written good clarinet parts?
Only the one opera, Clemenza di Tito.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one aria is Parto Parto, and the other one, Fiorini something. Oh yeah, sorry. There are two arias in that opera. I don't know which action, but yeah.
That was the one that Julia sang.
But I wanted to say that, you know, this week marks our being on Zoom every Monday night for a year now.
Wow.
Really?
That's
And
amazing.
And really I just want to thank you all for coming along on this journey. And to also say that I'm a little tuckered out.
Yes.
I'm gonna do the radio show next week, and then we'll Zoom next week, and I'm gonna take a month off from both the radio show and the Zoom. We may run repeats on the radio, but I just need a little bit of time to replenish the batteries a little bit, and we'll pick it up after July 5th. But I really just wanted to thank you all for just coming along. I think these sessions have just been really, meaningful. We started out not knowing what was ahead and just getting together and hearing and talking about music, and we continue to do so, with now the light at the end of the tunnel happening, and the possibility of us being all together. And David mentioned, I can't wait to, when we're all in the hall and we actually see one another and meet one another, since we've been congregating for so long. It will be really lovely to do that. But so I'll be here next week. We'll do one, and then we're going to take a little hiatus. Okay, everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Well,
thank you all.
Thank you.
Stay well.
There's so much work into the research for these programs. It's
Yeah, a lot of time.
I agree.
so much.
He spends a
It's
lot
an
of time
education.
getting it together.
Thank you.
Thank
All the
you.
research and
Thank you for
prepping
all
for
this.
each program has
Tremendous.
been excellent.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm really glad you enjoy them.
And we enjoy every word.
Every word.
And every music.
Yes,
All the
exactly.
new pieces we've heard, it's just great.
Great. Thank you. So, all right, everybody, have a great night, and we'll see you next week. Okay.
Okay.
Be well.
Take care,
Yeah.
everybody. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.